When the horror circus came to town, people of Derrington County found themselves unable to sleep. If the clowns weren't showing up at windows in the middle of the night, scaring their kids shitless, they were busy sneaking into the houses in the wee hours of the day and spraying horrifying words in equally horrific lettering with paint shades that were a little too close to the color of blood. Needless to say, the circus and its inhabitants were chased out of the county by law enforcement before they could cause any more havoc than they already had. However, the imprints of what they did to the town, especially for the children, wasn't as easy to erase as the blood-colored graffiti on their walls. It started off slowly, when children the age of 4 would wake from their sleep, screaming hysterically, and before their parents could calm them down and figure out what was wrong, they collapsed and never lasted long enough to make it to the hospital. They always died on the way, no matter how fast the ambulances were. Within 3 months, all 13 of the county's 4-year-olds had been buried by their grieving families. And just when the mayor thought he could take a deep breath of relief, his very own 5-year-old son kicked off the next dying epidemic in his age category. Inca, the newest admission to the town's orphanage, knew what was going on, or at least she had an inkling, but was unable to relate that to anyone because she was mute, crippled, and had not learned how to write well. She came into the town with the circus and had been rescued from the cage she'd come in by the good-hearted citizens of Derrington. She wished there was a way that she could pay back that kindness by helping them out of their plight. But she knew no one would listen to the voice of silence. The epidemic ravaged the occupants of Derrington every night, and in the span of 6 weeks, the sleeping death syndrome had claimed all the 5-year-olds in the town before inevitably moving on to the next available age grade. Parents were trying to slow the progression of the plague by keeping watch all night long with their children, but that only resulted in making their kids sleepier. So much so that if they managed to make it through a few nights, they'd end up collapsing to their deaths, as if they had dozed off within a millisecond. The mayor's office was unable to curb the deaths, couldn't provide a reason as to why their children were dying, but was determined to get to the bottom of the matter. Such steadfastness was assuring to the townspeople, as evil came to visit them with the darkness every single night. Rapidly, families began to pack their belongings and leave the town in droves, but they returned just as quickly as they had rushed out when they discovered children taking outside the city limits would die the moment they fell asleep, no matter what their age was. The sleeping death stopped working in chronological order when outside the confines of Derrington. With her heart hanging heavily in her chest, Inca watched on as every other child succumbed to the plague right in her shelter, and even more on the news. Even though the caretakers tried their best to keep every child awake, there wasn't much they could do to save the lives of the children. She wished she had the ability to walk, or talk, or even write, but she had none. So the city suffered on. By the time a year had passed, the town's only remaining inhabitants were adults, youths from the age of 18 upwards, and babies. But there was no hope for the babies either, as they always died in their sleep on their 4th birthday, no matter how much the child's parents tried to stop it. Derrington soon became desolate. The mourning parents, the ones who had not put an end to things themselves, that is, began to leave one after another from the town that had taken everything from them. The only people who ever visited were the occasional documentary team and international news channels with their heavy-duty gear to come and cover the thrilling story of how a town lost almost 300 children in 1 year. The once vibrant town began to collapse on itself. There was still no explanation for the heart-wrenching devastation, and it shocked Inca that nobody had thought to ask a very simple question. Why, no one thought it strange that a single 13-year-old, frail-looking child hadn't succumbed to the sleeping death, or why no one had traced the start of the plague occurring after they had been accosted by the terrifying circus. Inca was disappointed that in the entire town of kind-hearted and good-natured people, not one of them had been able to guess the cause of their torment. Not one had bothered to raise a brow at the existence of the vulnerable-looking girl that sat alone in the dilapidated building of the orphanage and glowed, regardless of the fact that there was no form of sustenance available in the filth she dwelled in. Inca wished she'd been able to help them. If only they just suspected something, anything about the girl, or at least attempted to put her in restraints, she would have stopped. Inca was glad, however, that they'd fed her enough souls to last a few more centuries. She hadn't been sure when her succubus sister had recommended this place, when it had been time to find sufficient nourishment. But now she understood what her sister said about being served a buffet. Plethora, Inca's sister, had fed from the town a few hundred years before, and now Inca planned to guard the town for the next few hundred years. She would lift the curse so that the town could thrive again once more and fatten their children up to feed her sister when she came back.
Subscribe today or beware.